Guys, this is Rob Lambert. I want to introduce Boyd Jones. Boyd will be our presenter today, and you are truly honored to have him here. I'll tell you why. When people come to me to do asset protection, if they're just totally clean and have a bunch of money and they don't have any complaints, it's real simple. I just get aggressive and protect their money. But that's rare and extraordinary. Most people come to you because they have a problem. And the effectiveness of the asset protection is directly related to the quality of the legal representation. You can quote me there. Boyd is one of the true great lawyers in the United States when it comes to representing people. Well, he's great at collecting money, but when it comes to knowing the process and representing people who are in trouble. And he has been able to mitigate problems for people that most lawyers would be shut down by the complexity. He's going to share some of his real-world techniques. It's kind of like Duck Dynasty meets Harvard Law School. He's got a little bit of each, and when it all comes down to it, he gets down to, well, let's take out the 50 caliber machine guns and start firing. That's sometimes, he never breaks the law, he never crosses the line, but he knows it. So Boyd, take it away. Regale my readers with brilliance for the next hour and then answer all their questions. Take it away, Boyd. I hope that brilliant introduction didn't go unnoticed.
Well, thanks, Rob. Who's muted? Am I muted?
No, we hear you fine. Go ahead, Boyd.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Rob. Everybody, welcome to the webinar. My name is Boyd Jones. I'm a partner at the law firm of Bush, Reed & Jones, PC in Marietta, Georgia. I've been practicing law for about 16 years, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. My primary practice areas have concentrated in the areas of business and commercial litigation with a great deal of post-judgment collection, as well as pretty much all facets of property, casualty, and construction insurance defense litigation. When Rob asked me to speak today, I was very eager to do so. During the time that I've practiced law, I've had a number of clients walk in and out of my office looking for help or advice. And throughout my career and in dealing with Rob, there is a number of business practices that my clients have engaged in that have led directly to the loss of their assets. And so what I'd like to do, we've prepared a PowerPoint to kind of briefly get us through some asset protection overview, and then what I'd like to do is walk you through the bad business practices that you need to be aware of if you're not, to help you mitigate some of the problems that are very difficult for me and Rob to deal with on the back end of a lawsuit or judgment. So what I hope to do today is to give you some practical knowledge and tips on what I've learned over the past couple of years in assisting my clients weave through the mess of running businesses with the goal of accumulating wealth and assets. So if we would, Tony, would you please take us to the first page of the PowerPoint? What is asset protection? And as generally as it can be stated, asset protection is a comprehensive plan to minimize risk and avoid the loss of business and personal assets. And I can't emphasize the word comprehensive, because it's not just a business entity. It's not just insurance. It's not just a trust. It is a comprehensive business, financial, and legal plan that you have to put in place at the outset of any business venture or during the business venture before a crisis arises. And through the plan, if you use the right tools and speak to the right professionals, you should be able to identify risks for your particular business or situation, and then learn how to mitigate those risks, and to the extent that you've already been exposed to a risk, help you mitigate loss by preserving business and personal assets. And we're going to go through some examples. And I've had a few cases, the facts are just so egregious they'll shock your conscience, that my clients have gone through, and I think it'll put into context what you can do on the front end and what you're going to need to do on the back end of a claim if you find yourself in the need of someone like me or Rob. So what I'd like to do is get Tony to go to the next page of the PowerPoint. When you talk about asset protection, there are many different tools that people will help you utilize to protect your assets. And there are three main categories: business entities, insurance, and trusts. Business entities, typically you'll find in the United States and abroad, most people that engage in any type of substantial business either incorporate a corporation or organize a limited liability company. Sometimes other business entities are utilized, but primarily corporations and limited liability companies are used to form and organize the structure under which you're going to conduct your business. And what is important about your business entities is that you've got to make sure that you're picking the right entity, that you understand the rules for running that entity, and that the organization, the formation of that company is complete and correct. If it is not, you may find yourself in a very bad situation, and especially in this day and time with paper trails and computer imprints on documents, it's very difficult to go back and create something that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. So when you're doing something in the here and now, you want to make sure it's complete and it's correct. Now, I can tell you that a lot of my clients, I haven't had a single one walk into my office as a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. We typically frown on those business entities because your personal assets are going to be right in the crosshairs of any potential creditor. So you typically never want to get into any type of high-risk business as a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. And we're going to talk about how you form some of these companies and some of the pitfalls and mistakes that people make that they may not be aware of that could expose them to the loss of their personal assets. And we're going to talk about that momentarily. Now, insurance. Most of my clients get the minimum. Insurance is one of your first-line defenses in the event your business gets sued for committing a tort. And when you engage in business over time, you may have a dispute over a contract. Somebody paid you or didn't pay you or did or didn't deliver conforming goods, and you may end up in litigation. That may cost you money. But your contract claims you can typically manage and mitigate. And I can tell you through experience, most contract claims you can settle and negotiate. The other ones that are a little more problematic are the tort claims, and where good attorneys and good business practices can guide you through a contract dispute. Torts are a little different, and these are claims that arise from negligence, fraud, assault, battery, wrongful death. These are the claims and causes of action that can bankrupt a business or an individual. So when you have the opportunity to assess what type of insurance fits your particular business or business entity, you want to look at your general commercial liability policies. You want to look at what your states require for minimum coverage, and then you want to find out what is the maximum coverage. Because in a lot of instances, getting $5 million in property and casualty insurance or general commercial liability insurance is not much more than the $1 million minimum policy that the law required. In addition to maximizing the coverage you can get with your insurance, most people, and I'm speaking strictly from my experience with my clients here in Georgia, they typically never have considered or didn't know about umbrella or excess insurance. You know, you can get $1 million policy for your business or personally, and it's merely $200, $300, $400 a year. And some companies can provide a $10 million excess or umbrella policy or a $50 million policy for a few $100s more, a few thousand. And if you have a tremendous amount of assets and wealth that you've accumulated through the successful maneuvering and management of a successful business, you need to have that insurance. That is your first line defense. And when I talk to you about some practical cases where it's come into play, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Trusts, very important. This is where you ultimately park your money and your assets. And the reason they're important is because they place your assets in a venue where creditors can't attach them. They can't grab them and take them. I can tell you that I've shown up many times with a deputy sheriff rolling onto someone's property. I've seized helicopters, I've seized airplanes, cars, jewelry, furniture, pianos. I've gone into businesses. I've had safety deposit boxes open. I've had the cash register open. I've gone into doctor's offices, chiropractor's offices, and I've started removing equipment right in the middle of the day. These are the things that you want to avoid. So if none of that stuff is in your name or none of it's owned by the business, it's going to make it very difficult for a creditor to grab it. So trusts are very important. If you've got an asset that's valuable that you want to keep, you need to think really hard about how it's titled. And trusts are used, and Rob is the expert there, to protect those trusts and shield them from your creditors. And understand, not all trusts are created equally. Some jurisdictions don't like them, and if creditors can establish certain elements, they can bust the trusts. You may spend tens of thousands of dollars on an attorney telling you Trust A is the way to go, only to see it get busted. So your asset protection plan, you need to put some thought into it, and you need to make sure that when you're consulting with your attorneys, your financial advisors, and your accountants, that people actually know what they're talking about and have practical experience in that area. And one of the questions you want to ask when you're doing your asset protection planning is, have you ever done Plan A that you've proposed, and if so, has it ever been challenged legally? Has anyone ever busted this? And yep. See what they tell you.
Boyd, one of the things that you pointed out briefly, but I just want to really emphasize, the umbrella insurance is the cheapest form of extra, I don't know, sort of padding between you and your creditors I can think of. Not because you're likely to use the umbrella insurance, but because that increases the insurance company's stake. And what you do get with the policy is a defense. Usually and often your legal fees are the most distasteful, upsetting part of being attacked by a creditor. And oftentimes, if it's done correctly, your insurance company can be forced to pay for Boyd, pay for your
exactly.
defense.
And that is a very important point, is if you've got good insurance and you've got a lot of insurance and you're exposed to a claim that would be covered, it does trigger that duty under the policy for the insurance company to defend you. When we get to the next slide, you'll understand why that can be important.
Boyd, many people say, Rob, render me insolvent. Make me a small target so there's nothing to take. Guys, asset protection is not for everything you own. It's for part of what you own. And insurance is one of your quivers. Never try, many people say, make me so protected I don't need insurance. That is absolutely wrong. Insurance is something you always need, just like you always need a good lawyer by your side and a good accountant by your side. This is not something to do totally on your own if you can avoid that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tony, if you'll go to the next slide. Now, there are all kinds of risk, but mainly there are two types. And whenever a client comes to me and I find out that the risk is from a public creditor, I cringe. Not so much the state government. It has a lot of power too, but the federal government and its agencies have unbridled power and authority, and they will crush you. I've had clients walk into my office. I've had lawsuits dropped on my desk from the FTC, and Rob's had a lot of experience with this with his clients. It doesn't really matter what your asset protection plan is, and it doesn't matter where you park money, assets, or trusts. if you've expatriated and moved some of your assets out of the United States, if you are one of the unlucky few that find yourself on the FTC's radar, and I'm using the Federal Trade Commission as an example, you're in for a world of hurt. Number one, the claims that are going to be brought by the FTC against you are generally not going to be covered by insurance, which means you're on your own, which means you're going to have to hire an attorney to defend that claim. And when you do, the type of attorney that you're going to have to hire, the quality attorney that you're going to have to hire, they're going to be over $400 an hour. And you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, defending a suit against the FTC. But the scary thing about that is not the fact that you're going to spend a ton of money. It's the fact that the FTC, once that suit is filed, they pretty much have a good idea of what you own, what businesses you own, where your assets are, where you bank, and then they go in, and the minute the suit is filed, the federal district judge in whatever district the case is filed will issue an order freezing your assets. You haven't even been adjudicated liable for having done anything wrong. All they have to do is file suit and make an allegation, and the court is going to freeze your assets. Then you're stuck getting basically an allowance from a receiver that the FTC appoints to manage your assets. You get an allowance. And it may or may not be
and it's
enough.
not enough. It's not enough to live. It's
No.
not. It never is enough, and it won't pay your legal fees.
It will not
really
pay your legal fees. So it can be detrimental. So keep in mind what I'm about to, when we talk about asset protection too, you need to understand that the business decisions and the judgment that you have in navigating and operating your business is going to determine whether you engage in high-risk behavior or low-risk behavior. So you need to know, what is my business line? Has the FTC ever hit anybody in my business, and if so, for what? And generally, professional services and a lot of nutritional supplements and get-rich-quick type programs, the FTC looks hard at marketing, and if it finds that you've engaged in the kind of catch-all claim they bring is unfair and deceptive trade practices. And it's real hard to describe what that is, but they just kind of know it when they see it, and they file it when they feel the need to. But by the time they do that, you're on the hook, whether you've done anything wrong or not. And by the time you prove your innocence, they've bankrupted you in attorney's fees. Now, I have had a client that just recently went through this. He was a passive investor in a company that got involved in some aggressive mobile messaging and internet marketing. And when the FTC levied that lawsuit and seized my client's assets, the suit was brought in April of 2013, but my client had sold his interest in the company on January 1st of 2012. At the time the FTC brought the suit, and during the time period for which my client did not own any ownership interest in this particular LLC, the FTC sued him because they found a document that had his name on it, and they froze all of his assets, all of his construction companies, everything that he owned in every business that he operated that had nothing to do with the loan he made to a buddy to do a startup internet company was frozen for months. All of his expatriated assets that were sitting overseas in bank accounts in the Caribbean and in other places were ordered to be brought back to the United States or go to jail. So he did what he needed to. He brought them back. And they put him on an allowance. Said you can't open any bank accounts. You can't start any new businesses. You can't do anything. You can run these 3 businesses, but the rest of these we're putting a receiver in to take over and liquidate. My client didn't own the business, and he didn't take an active part in the management of the company. But to get out of that action, my client had to spend close to $300,000 in attorney's fees to negotiate a settlement, which basically consisted of the disgorgement of any distributions that he had received during his brief stint as a member of the company. But we were worried about it for a little while because we didn't quite know where it was going to go. But luckily, the FTC, saw that he was not an active part of the company, was not an active manager, and didn't engage in these acts, and said, disgorge, and we'll release you, and they did. Now, the manager of that company lost everything he had. They took it all. They took a Tag Heuer watch the man had gotten 20 years ago from his father when he graduated from college. They took a 20-year-old watch. They took it all. He's starting over, but he's young. He's 42, so he's okay.
What type of monthly stipend did your client, who was a very substantial man, what type of monthly stipend did he get to support himself and his family during this time?
He has 2 girls in college. He is divorced, so he has no obligation to his wife, but he got $10,000 a month.
Yeah. I just went through something with another government agency. My client spent $9 million in defense costs. He won the case, but he's broke, and he's decided to never work again. He's taking the little bit he has left, and he's leaving the country. He doesn't want to be in a place where the government knows every single thing he's doing, and in his case, used it to ruin his business and terminate over 600 other jobs.
It happens, but that's part of the non-technical aspect of asset protection. If you're going to engage in a business, then you need to be educated about that business, and you need to kind of have a feeling and an understanding of where you can run afoul. Has the government ever sued anybody doing what I'm doing? And we're just getting, now some businesses, or if you're in construction or you're manufacturing product X, Y, or Z, your risk of drawing federal ire increase when you're selling a product versus building a house in a state. The risk of drawing the ire of the FTC diminishes greatly when you're not engaged in interstate commerce. So when we tell you this, keep in mind, some of you are probably engaged and have businesses that the FTC may never even look at. But you got to understand too, and I will say this, in the case that the FTC brought against my client for that foreign business, the manager of that company, everything that the FTC accused them of and brought about was 100% preventable. It was 100% preventable, but greed and short-sightedness and bad business judgment resulted in this suit. When you've got a business and people start complaining and posting stuff on the website about your business, especially if it engages in interstate commerce, you better jump on that and quell it, because the FTC constantly monitors consumer complaints, and that's where they pick their next big hot topic lawsuit to go through. And they are very brash. If you don't believe me, go to the Federal Trade Commission's website and look at their trophy board. They post every lawsuit they file, and they tell you what they recover. We successfully sued this person and recovered $12 million and put them out of business. They're very brash about it. But know that even if you're right and you win, you're going to lose. So the way you prevent yourself from getting in trouble with the federal government is make sure you understand the nature of your business, you have good lawyers, good advisors, and that you don't engage in acts for your particular industry that could bring someone in like the EPA, the FTC, the FCC, or the IRS. So those are things that you can do on the front end to save your assets, and that's about the only thing you can do to protect your assets from a public creditor. Now, private creditors, this is everybody other than a state or federal governmental entity. Private creditors, asset protection can be very powerful, and what we're going to talk about as we get to our next page in the PowerPoint are bad business practices that my clients have engaged in pervasively over the past 15 years that have had some dire consequences. Let's make sure you understand the nature of your business, you have good lawyers, good advisors, and that you don't engage in acts for your particular industry that could bring someone in like the EPA, the FTC, the FCC, or the IRS. So those are things that you can do on the front end to save your assets, and that's about the only thing you can do to protect your assets from a public creditor. Now, private creditors, this is everybody other than a state or federal governmental entity.